today you have your Chapter 11 review. So you're going to be reviewing all about your 3D shapes, your 2D shapes, and then equal parts, halves, thirds, fourths. Okay, so before we get started on that, we're just going to kind of go over our shape that we discussed. So the first thing we talked about in Chapter 11 was our 3D shapes. So we specifically focused in on a cylinder. Remember, a cylinder might remind you of like a pop can or a soup can. A sphere is like a ball, golf ball, volleyball, basketball, really any ball. A cone reminds you of like a party hat or an ice cream cone. A cube, I always think of like a box or like a dice. And remember, I'll come back to that. And a rectangular prism. I always think of like a shoebox or a Kleenex box, something like that. And remember, our cube and our rectangular prism were made up of things, specific things. First thing being faces. So your faces are your flat surfaces of your shape. So like this would be a face, this would be a face, this would be a face. Your edges, remember your edges are where your faces meet. And then your vertex or vertices are like your corners, so where your edges meet. Okay, so those are our 3D shapes. And then we specifically talked about faces, edges, and vertices. Then we moved on to 2D shapes. So our first 2D shape we talked about was a triangle. And remember, triangles always have 3 sides, 1, 2, 3. We talked about quadrilaterals, any shape that has 4 sides, so like 1, 2, 3, 4. We talked about pentagons. Pentagons have 5 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And hexagon has 6 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so on your review, the first thing you're going to do on number 1 is you are going to match the shapes. So you're going to match the everyday object you might know to the 3D shape it would be. Number 2, do the sentences describe a cube? Choose yes or no. All right, so remember, this is a cube. If you have a dice or something that is this shape at home, you might want to grab it for this next one. So number 2, the first statement that's made, or the first sentence they give you is, a cube has 4 faces. So if you agree a cube has 4 faces, you would mark yes. If you do not agree, you'd mark no. So remember, your faces are your flat surfaces of your cube. Okay? The next sentence says a cube has 8 vertices. So remember, vertices are your corners. The next sentence says a cube has 14 edges. So your edges are where your faces meet. Okay. And the last sentence says each face of a cube is a square. So if you were to break this apart, would the face be a square? If you don't have an object that is shaped like a cube at home, you can always use this cube right here to help you count those faces, edges, and vertices. Okay, and then down below here where it says rewrite each sentence that is not true to make it a true sentence, you don't have to do that part. All right, so then if we flip it over to page 772, number 3, draw lines to show thirds. So you're going to show thirds. Then right here it says, explain how you know that the parts are thirds. So how do you know that this is, after you draw the lines, how do you know this is divided into thirds and this is divided into thirds? And remember that key word we talked about over and over and over throughout our last lessons. It starts with an E. All right, number 4. Will and Anna have gardens that are the same size. They each divided their gardens into fourths. What are two different ways they can divide the garden? Divide the gardens. Draw to show your answers. So this is Will's garden and this is Anna's garden. They each are divided into fourths, so show me two different ways you could show fourths. Number 5, draw to show halves, thirds, and fourths, and then color a half of, a third of, and a fourth of the shape. So remember, that's when you shade in. You can use pencil, marker, crayon, whatever you want to use. Then when you flip it over, 6 and 7 are both crossed off. You're going to go down to 8, and we're on page 773. Rachel makes a pentagon and a quadrilateral with toothpicks. She uses one toothpick for each side of a shape. How many toothpicks does Rachel need? So she makes a pentagon and a quadrilateral using toothpicks. So think back to the beginning of this lesson. Remember, how many sides does a pentagon have? How many sides does a quadrilateral have? And then you'll add that together to figure out how many toothpicks she would need, because each side would be a toothpick. Then you are going to turn to page 774, number 9. Kevin drew two-dimensional shapes that had 9 angles in all. Draw the shapes Kevin could have drawn. So he drew a 2D shape here, and he drew a 2D shape here. This shape's amount of angles plus this shape's amount of angles equaled 9. So think about our 2D shapes: triangles, quadrilaterals, pentagon, and hexagon. We know triangles have 3 angles, quadrilaterals have 4 angles, pentagons have 5 angles, and a hexagon has 6 angles. So you need to figure out what combination of 2 of those shapes would give you 9 angles altogether. But remember, this shape plus this shape equals 9. You're not going to draw a shape that has 9 angles over here and a shape that has 9 angles here. However many are here and however many are here, the angles are going to have to equal 9. Number 10, fill in the bubble next to the shapes that show fourths. So any shape that is divided into fourths, you'd bubble it in. And number 11, draw each shape where it belongs in the chart. So if it's a shape with fewer than 4 angles, you would draw it down here. If it is a shape with more than 3 angles, you would draw it here. If you don't want to try and draw them down there, you can always draw lines to where they go. Okay? And then that is your review for chapter 11.